Welcome at the HR Quarterly Update. This is the last edition of the year, and I'm here with my colleague Alain Camonier, and my name is Nikki de Groot, and this is brought to you by Pallas Employment Lawyers. I will start off like we are both employment lawyers and bringing all the updates on employment legislation and case law to you. First, I want to mention usually we have 4 webinars during the year, each quarter. And next year we have also a webinar. We start off the year in March with the first webinar on 4th of March, on the usual time, 4 p.m. until 5 p.m. And this year, next year, 25, we have also, instead of one webinar on the 3rd quarter, a HR Quarterly live event. And this will take place at the Olympic Stadium in Amsterdam. And it's a full afternoon with guest speakers. And of course, we will touch upon all the important HR topics. And we are very much looking forward to it. Of course, you will receive an invitation for this. And yeah, I would invite you to register for this live event where we can meet you live and hopefully we combine it, of course, with also 3 webinars next year. We will start off this webinar with a few topics, and we will start off with self-employed workers. The second topic is on-call and zero contracts. The third topic is the protection of ill employees in the Netherlands. And the fourth topic is unilateral changes of employment conditions. Of course, you can ask us some questions. We will see those questions during the webinar, but also we have some, probably we have some time to respond to at the end. So I think we're all set for to bring you this lively webinar on hot topics in HR. And we will start off with self-employed workers. And
the floor is now with me. Can you provide me with the remote control? Thank you very much. My name is Alain Camonier, and I will talk you through self-employed workers in the Netherlands, because things are going to change. People in the Netherlands who are listening at the moment likely already will know that per January 2025. But be aware, everything which has to do with contractors will change. We start off with a poll, and the poll question is: do you contract yourself as the company in the Netherlands, self-employed personnel in the Netherlands? So do you have contractors in the Netherlands? That's the question, yes or no. And I think you have the question now on your screen. And the situation is in the Netherlands that we have on a working number of employees in the Netherlands of 10 million. We have more than 1.2 contractors, self-employed contractors in the Netherlands. And that is a little bit of a problem, we think. And that means that the problem lies in those people do not build up pension. Those people, the contractors, have no protection when being ill. There are no insurances or no obligated insurances for contractors in the Netherlands. And the most important issue is contractors do not pay social premiums, and in addition, wage tax is also not paid by contractors. That is a problem also for the long run, because people in the Netherlands tend to grow older, and more people will be over 67 in a couple of years than is now the situation. So how to deal with that, the contractors in the Netherlands. To give you an idea, is I took these figures from website of the government, and it shows that in the European Union approximately 9%, 8%, 9% contractors are working compared to people working on an employment contract. And as you can see, the Netherlands is far over that number because we approximately have 12.5% compared to the people working on an employment contract of contractors in the Netherlands, which is quite a lot, and is not there's not a good balance in the Netherlands. As you can see, there are countries which have more contractors compared to employees in their countries: Greece, Poland, Italy, and the Czech Republic. But the reason for that is those countries in Europe, they are more agricultural based than the Netherlands, where we have a lot of people working at offices. So Netherlands has a little bit too much contractors.
Would you like the outcome of the poll?
Yes, please.
So maybe we can go back to the slide. Then we know what's yes and no. It's 44% yes and 56% no.
Okay. Good, so almost 50-50, I would
Almost
say.
50-50.
Almost 50-50. So if, new picture, if we look at how do contractors evolve and how do contractors, the number of contractors grow in the Netherlands, you can see that the top lines are the contractors in the Netherlands. Those are the ones I would like to talk about. And every year since 2022, that's green, to 2023, dark blue, until 2024, light blue, we are growing with contractors in the Netherlands. So if we don't do anything, the number of contractors will simply grow, and that also means that the number of employees will decrease because we still have the same people, of the number of people in the Netherlands. And if you then look at flex employees in the Netherlands, this is a picture where you can see the people who are not working on an indefinite employment contract, so flex employees, and if you and the flex employees are everybody who are not working on an indefinite contract, so those are people working on a fixed contract, an on-call contract based on an agency workers contract who are being seconded, and the contractors, those people, if we take both the people with a flex relation, which is the top line, plus the people who are the contractors, that's the second line, and if you add those up, we have more than 3 million people on a flex contract, which is in the Netherlands a problem because we want to have certainty for our employees in the Netherlands, because that certainty also gives some certainty in the private lives with the family. You can buy a house when you have certainty. You can't do that if you have a flex contract or if you're a contractor. So it provides all kinds of problems. So things will change per January 1st because of these reasons. And what will change? Per January 1st, 2025, so that is in 3 weeks of time, the tax authorities will check whether contractors can be considered to be real contractors or must be considered employees. Authorities have stated we are going to resume our inspections as of January 1st. We will go to companies and see whether there are contractors and whether those contractors are indeed contractors and not employees. And if we think as tax authority that those contractors can be seen as employees, at that stage we are going to say that they should pay wage taxes, should pay social premiums, and maybe even, if that has taken a long time before January 1st, 2025, and we can consider that people knew or should have known that this is an employee situation, we could also provide a penalty for both the contractor, which is then an employee, and the company who hires the contractor. So be careful in that perspective. So if you are working with contractors, the idea is that you don't have an employment contract, of course. You should use standard agreements, and you can find those standard agreements on the website of the tax authorities in the Netherlands. And if there's a discussion about is it a contractor or is it an employment contract, and the big difference is the company able to give its authority over the employee or over the contractor while providing the work. At that stage, you have to look at wage taxes, social security contributions, pensions. An employee is eligible for pension, and therefore pension premiums should be paid. An employee has dismissal protection. A contractor doesn't have that. There's continued payment during illness, and when an employee becomes ill, you have to pay for 104 weeks of illness the salary during the employment contract, and that is something which does not happen with contractors. So those are the risks, and there the tax authorities will start checking on that per January 1st. I also mentioned a web link where you could go to, if you read Dutch, of course, and where the discussion about employment contracts or service contracts and false self-employment, as it's called, is mentioned by the government. Why are we in this situation? And what is happening? Because I started off with the situation that we have more than 1.2 million contractors in the Netherlands. And now, per January 1st, those contractors may be seen not really as contractors, but as employees. And the tax authority will check whether that is the situation or not. Why is that the situation? In 2016, which is 8 years ago, more than 8 years ago, a new law came into force, and that was the DBA law, the Declaration of Employment Relationship, of the deregulation, as I should say, of employment relationships, came into force. And that law said in 2016, we can check as a tax authority whether a contract agreement, a service agreement, can be considered a real contract, a contractor's agreement, or it should be considered an employment contract. And if that can be seen as an employment agreement, then all the negative aspects, especially non-paid social premiums and wage taxes, could be claimed with both the company and the contractor. So that gave rise to a lot of uncertainties and a lot of problems. And so 6 months later, also in 2016, the State Secretary said, we're going to suspend this new law and the tax authorities will not enforce this law, except for really malicious parties. The idea was that 1 year later, the problem should be solved. However, the suspension now still exists, and it will exist until January 1st, 2025. So a bad law came into force in 2016, and nobody did anything with that law until now. So why now did it change? As from 2016 until 2024, a lot of people and a lot of governmental organizations looked into the matter and gave an opinion or a ruling or a judgment on this situation. For example, there was advice from the Social Economic Council. Various committees were formed and sent out their reports to the government. There were 3 important Supreme Court rulings in that period all about, is it a contractor or is it an employee? There was an internet consultation by the government. We had an audit office report by an advice committee of the government. All industry branch organizations said something, and we even had lately an advice from the Council of State, Raad van State in Dutch. So a lot of paperwork, and that led to the situation that a new law is now coming into force, but that new law is not coming into force per January 2025, but per January 2026, hopefully. Hey, but if there's a new law coming up in 2026, why is then the tax authority starting again with checking the situation per 2025? To be honest, I really don't know. I think that is because of a political decision. So the tax authority will start to check the situations, the contracts again, based on the old law, which was suspended until January 2025, and will start by using the old law, looking whether they can claim premiums, taxes from both contractor and company. And in the meantime, a new law will come into force. Is that strange? Yes, it is. Can we do anything about it? No, not really. Simply be aware of it and be aware that you do the good thing and not come into a dispute with the tax authority. So, how does the new law work? Because what the new law is going to say is also important to understand how the tax authorities will check in 2025. And why is that? Because the tax authorities should take into consideration the old law, but also all the developments of the Supreme Court, which have taken place until now. And that is also the reason why this new law in 2026 will come up. I understand that this is a little bit complicated, what I'm saying here, but that's the situation. If a contractor has multiple clients per year, invest time, money in building reputation, has business investments of significance and size, for example, his own computer, his own car, and is an entrepreneur mentioned in the registered at the Chamber of Commerce, that is not so important anymore. That used to be very important, it's so if you are at the Chamber of Commerce, if you say I have multiple clients, that is not the criterion which will help you saying this is a contract, service contract, and not an employment contract. So what is then important? This sheet says when can you be considered a contractor, a self-employed worker? One, and that is not a list where if you hit one of the targets, then you're in. It's something which all should be seen together. If you are independently working, so there is no authority over you by the company. If the employee or the worker does not perform tasks which can also be carried out by employees within the organization, so you're not really embedded into the organization, you do something differently. For example, an interim director who does work as a CFO is embedded in the organization. A director or a manager who does a reorganization as an interim director can be seen as a real contractor because he is not embedded in the organization. You have those different criteria when are you an employee or when are you a contractor. So if you do not perform tasks carried out by employees embedded in the organization, you can be seen as a contractor. Specific knowledge which is not in the company available says that you likely will be a contractor. The compensation for you should be significantly higher than with employees. Again, leads to the situation that you could be considered a contractor. You assume entrepreneurial risk, and therefore your real own investments, such as your equipment, etc., leads to the conclusion maybe you're a contractor or likely, and you present yourself as an entrepreneur. And then you say, hey, but you present yourself as an entrepreneur and in 2026 that is not that important anymore. That's correct, but now it is still a little bit important to make it very easy. Not. Second slide, when are you more associated with an employment contract, so an employee, so having a service contract, but tax authorities could say, sorry, you are not a contractor, but an employee, and therefore we regard you to be an employee with everything associated. The work is carried over an extended period, so a long period, more than 3 months, more than 6 months. It's not clear what is an extended period, but a year the discussion is going might be too long. You perform the work personally and cannot be replaced. You are being compensated, and the compensation is agreed upon in advance per hour and paid at a fixed time, just like employees, so to say. And the worker has an obligation to perform the best of their ability. So that is not agreeing upon the result, but agreeing upon doing your work that leads to the situation or the conclusion that you are an employee. Very complicated, a lot of information in a very small period, but be aware this is an issue. January 1st, tax authorities will check. We have a question?
Yeah, I think that's something we can be mindful of the time, can confirm. The new law is per 26 and the inspection as of 1st of January 25.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the floor is yours again.
Okay. Yeah, I will touch upon on-call and zero-hour contracts, and we will start off with a poll question. So the question is, do you use on-call and zero contracts right now? And you can just fill out yes or no, and I will continue, and later on I will get the outcome and then discuss it with you, just to see. I will start off with an example. Probably when you visit a restaurant or a bar, you will see some signs of we are hiring personnel. And then that could be a restaurant, a bar, retail, what so on. There is a lack of staff, so people really want to have staff because you want to have your business running. And then you will contact or you will get some replies from let's say a student, and you say, okay, I'm able to work in the restaurant or the shop. You don't agree to anything, but he's happy to do the work. You pay him something, and then again next week he will work again, and the next week after you will call him again, and he will work some time. That means that you actually have 3 contracts. And if you call him again, he has an indefinite contract. That's something you don't want. At the same time, we were discussing about self-employed contracts, ZZP, and also other flexible contracts. With the on-call contract could be a solution that you have the flexibility to have somebody stand by on call, but at the same time have the flexibility that you don't have to offer a indefinite contract. Are there limitations to on-call workers? Yes. I'm looking at the outcome of the poll, and we have the outcome is that 10% work with on-call workers and 90% doesn't. But who knows when there is limitation that you can contract, let's say self-employed, because that was 50-50. Maybe you consider another flexible form, and that could be on-call workers, of course. So I think worthwhile to mention it. And the on-call worker is on the political agenda for some time. We discussed it back in 2015, Work and Security Act. But even more during the Balanced Labor Market Act, the Wet Arbeidsmarkt in Balans. That was important because the definition of on-call workers was defined in the law. And what was the background? To have some more income security for the on-call worker and sufficient flexibility for the employer to respond to the business needs. And of course, that's of course, there should be a balance in between, so nobody will be harmed in a way. So we got this new definition in the law on the on-call agreement, and it's a little bit more complex to scope it. And this new on-call agreement definition tries to scope it. What is an on-call agreement? And it says the scope of the work is not specified as a fixed number of hours per time period of at most 1 month or at most 1 year. And the employee's right to wage is evenly distributed over the unit of time, or no payment entitlement if they have not performed the agreed work. And then I give you some example. If you have a contract of 20 hours per week and the payment is monthly, you don't have an on-call agreement. Let's say we have a not fixed hours, but it's in between 20 and 30 per week, and then you will look after and see for payment subsequent calculations. Yes, you have an on-call agreement. And if you look at again, you say I have between 20 and 30 hours per month. Again, you apply the subsequent calculations. Yes, you have an on-call agreement. And then if we look at the 40 to 60, and then for the time unit is 2 months, and then the payment is on a monthly basis, you have an on-call agreement. And if we look at, back in the day, we had some more contracts about 400 to 600 hours for every time unit of 6 months, and the calculation was subsequent. No, you don't have an on-call agreement. So you have some options there to say you have an on-call agreement. And what is important, once you have the qualification of an on-call agreement, what are the limitations, so to say? Because you agree to some flexibility, but there's also some obligations derived from the Dutch law. And one of them is the on-call notice period. The second one is the payment entitlement in case of a withdrawal of adjustment. So meaning if the on-call period, there's a call, and at last minute there you just withdraw it or you adjust it, there's still a payment entitlement. And there's also an obligatory offer for structural working time after 1 year, and there's also consequences for non-observance. And then a tip for the 10% that used on-call agreements, also mention the on-call agreement on the payslip. I will elaborate a little bit more on the on-call notice period. The minimum on-call notice period by law is 4 days. It could be shortened by the CLA to minimum 24 hours. The on-call notice period should be in writing or by electronic means. And there are consequences for no timely call or withdrawal or change of the call. What does it mean? Simply payment. So if you don't do it in time or there are changes, there's a minimum pay of 3 hours. Then the obligatory offer for structural working time, that will kick in after 1 year, and then you calculate what is the average working time after 1 year. Even though, let's say you have a contract of 2 years, you have to repeat it after every year, so you have to repeat it yearly. You have to bring the offer in writing or by electronic means. And there should be an acceptance by the employee within 1 month. But what we see is there are some pros and cons, of course, on the on-call worker agreement. And even though you need by law to offer something structural, we don't see the acceptance in practice very much. These are some pinpoints for the on-call agreement. And it should be stated that the employment contract is with a deferred duty of performance. Then you can opt for the on-call agreement of the 0 hours contract, the minimum payment of 3 hours for every call. In the first 6 months you can agree no work, no pay. Of course, you should be mindful of the on-call notice period. And you have to see if that's a minimum 4 days or less in case there's a CLA applicable. And of course, you have to be mindful of the obligatory offer for structural working time after 12 months. Any changes expected? Yes, there's a legislative proposal, Flexible Workers Increased Security Act, and it involves a lot of changes, but for the on-call agreement, it's stated that the 0 hours contract is no longer possible anymore. Then this was the end of the on-call agreement presentation, and we will continue with the protection of ill employees.
Thank you, Nikki. Are there no questions with respect to the on-call agreements?
No,
no,
for sure
no.
not.
So
no,
then,
no.
No questions. We go to the protection of ill employees. Can talk a lot about ill employees, of course, but first a poll, and that is: did any one of you receive a wage sanction by UWV? In Dutch, it's a loonsanctie. With respect to one of your ill employees. So did you suffer from such a penalty sent out by UWV? Yes or no? Again, we can talk a lot and a very long time about ill employees. There is a big change coming up in 2026, and you should be aware of that in 2025. That's the reason why we are telling you the story about ill employees at the moment. But to understand that, I'm going to explain a little bit about ill employees in the Netherlands, especially for the people who are listening to us abroad. What is the situation when you have an ill employee in the Netherlands at that stage, and that employee is ill and stays ill? You as a company will have the obligation to pay the salary of that employee for a period of up to 104 weeks. That's 2 years. So you should pay for an ill employee, irrespective whether or not he performs his work, likely not because he is ill, for 2 years period. And likely that is, in a lot of situations, 100% in the first year and 70% in the second year. After 104 weeks, the employer can terminate the employment contract if you have done your work as a company correctly. Come to that in a minute. And that means that you can terminate the employment contract. However, Dutch law says that you should pay a transition payment when you terminate the employment contract. And that is a big thing because you paid the employee for 2 years and he didn't perform his work. You had to pay the company doctor. You had to pay all kinds of advisors with respect to the work that the employee could have done, or adjustments to the work you could have done. You had to pay bureaus for possibilities for the employees to find another job with another employer. All kinds of reintegration obligations for you as an employer under Dutch law. And on top of that, you have to pay a transition payment, which maybe isn't that reasonable. In Dutch law, we thought that was indeed the case, not reasonable. So since 2022, if you pay the transition payment, you could send the invoice to UWV, our employee insurance agency, the authorities, so to say, and they would pay you back the amount you paid to the employee with respect to the transition payment. And that could be a significant amount, a substantial amount. This compensation, be aware, will no longer be eligible after July 1st, 2026. Exception is for employers, for companies who have 25 or less than 25 employees. So small companies can still be reimbursed by the UWV, but large companies, medium-sized companies, 25 more employees will no longer be eligible for such compensation. Be aware of that, and that means that if you have employees who you paid for 104 weeks, please make sure that in 2025 you end the relationship, terminate such an employee, and have your transition payment reimbursed by UWV, because you can't do that anymore in 2026. So
the outcome of the poll?
Yeah, the result of the poll.
So the outcome of the poll is yes 25% and no 75%.
Okay, so that's a large number.
Yeah.
How does that work? What I said, the employer's obligation when an employee is ill for a long time, you should pay at least 70% of the wages for 104 weeks. In a lot of situations, 100% in the first year, 70% in the second year. Dutch law states that the employer is required to have the employee reintegrate, and has to do that together with the company doctor or with occupational health service, or it's not or, it is and with the occupational health service. So for 2 years you should pay, and you should do all kinds of actions to have this employee reintegrate within the company, and you should be advised by the company doctor who you should pay, and the health service bureau which you should pay as well. And you have also strict administrative obligations. Dutch people will understand this. I've provided you with the link on my sheet, but you should come with all kinds of reports. What are you going to do? What is the problem? What happened after the first year? And everything should be done in writing and should be registered. If you don't do it correctly, and especially when you're too late, because the strict administrative obligations, they have deadlines, deadlines given by Dutch law. If you are too late, 1 day too late, for example, at that stage, after 104 weeks, UWV could say, sorry, we are going to check whether you have a good reintegration report. If we are to the opinion that you did not fulfill your obligations towards this ill employee, or even worse, if the company doctor made a decision and we do not agree with the decision of the company doctor, and they do that after 104 weeks, and the company doctor made a decision, say, in the 6th week of the illness, so that is already more than a year ago. If UWV says we don't agree with your reintegration activities, we will give you a penalty, and that is a sanction of salary sanction, and that means that you will have to pay for 1 year extra the salary. So you already paid for 2 years, did all kinds of work and paid all kinds of services to reintegrate the employee. You did not succeed, because some people cannot be reintegrated successfully, of course. And then UWV says, sorry, you did not follow the rules correctly. You were a little bit late. It's understandable, not understandable what you did for whatever reason. And then we'll provide you with a penalty, with a sanction of an extra year salary and an extra year of reintegration services. And what I understand, Nikki, is that 25% of the people present here already experience such a sanction. So be aware, it's very important that you take the obligations of an employer during illness very seriously to prevent such a penalty. And you as an employer, you are responsible for the reintegration. Doesn't matter what a doctor says, doesn't matter what occupational health service says, you are responsible, and you will get the penalty if you don't do your things correctly. So be careful. Employees, on the other hand, should be, must also work for their reintegration within the company. So they should listen to the company doctor, they should listen to the employer, they should listen to the occupational health service, they should cooperate with the reintegration, and should also assist, be cooperative when amending action plans, when setting up action plans, etc., and perform the work which is being provided by the employer in the situation of reintegration and as said by the company doctor. Very important to understand, every employer who says this is very cumbersome and 104 weeks is not my cup of tea, paying salary during that period, I'm going to close a settlement agreement or agree upon a settlement agreement with the employee. Be aware, an ill employee cannot not sign a settlement agreement, because at that stage, if he does so, he will be liable against UWV, because UWV says the employer has the obligation to pay 104 weeks. If you voluntarily say, I settle my employment contract, so I'm terminating my employment contract voluntarily and I'll go to UWV, we are not going to pay. Go back to your employer and ask your employer for payment. And legally, he has the right to do so. If the employee does not cooperate, because you have the obligation as employer to reintegrate, or have the employee reintegrate, if the employee does not go along, if he does not, or he or she does not cooperate, at that stage you can only not pay out the salary. So not going to a termination, you cannot pay out salary. Stop payment, that is the sanction for employees who do not work. Again, last sheet, more or less the same sheet as in the first situation. A lot of rules for ill employees, for reintegration, for continuing paying salary. However, at the moment, you can still, after 104 weeks, have your transition payment, which you must pay by law, have reimbursed by the UWV. Make use of that. Make use of that in 2025. In 2026, you'll come to the situation where you can't do that anymore. Be aware. Nikki, last. Oh, I have a question.
We have a question. Yeah, this the question is the 104 weeks. Does it also apply if you're partly sick? So if you perform a few tasks, meaning you can work like 40% and you're sick 60%.
If you're a part-time worker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then the one.
No, I mean your job is 100%.
Yeah.
40% you can do your own task. 60% you're ill, or
then you're
versa.
60. Yeah. If you're part-time sick, so to say, because you have multiple functions and you can only provide one function, or you can only work for half of the time, for example. Yes. Then the 104 weeks also applies for the situation. Also, you have the reintegration obligations, and you should also listen to the company doctor. It could be the situation that after 104 weeks the employee is being declared disabled for example 60%, and then for 40% Dutch government says that he should earn his own money for the 40%, and if he can't do that with his own employer, at that stage he will get an unemployment benefit for the 40% and a disablement benefit for the 60%.
Right. Thanks.
The last topic.
Yes. Unilateral changes of employment conditions. And we start off with a poll question. And the poll question is, do you have a unilateral changes clause in your template employment contracts? For example, the employer is authorized to unilaterally amend the employment contract if its overriding interest is such that the employee's interest harmed by the amendment must yield to in accordance with standards of reasonableness and fairness. So your answer could be yes, no, or I don't know. I will continue. And in the meantime, we will receive your answers. I think it's good that there are many reasons or motivations that you have a wish to change the employment condition. It could be harmonization, because your company just taking over another company, and also this includes some employees. Or it could be a financial reason that one of the employment conditions is very costly. many motivation. But there are some preliminary questions. And number one is, what is the change? Is that a change because of a change of law, or is there a real change of your employment conditions? Meaning you're paying just less, or you're just not offering the car lease allowance, or you just there's a reduction. And the other question is if this is a real employment condition. And we see that there is some case law to just qualify whether this is an employment condition or not. And I will touch upon this later. And another question is this an individual change or a collective change? Because there are different requirements, whether this is an individual change or a collective change. I'm looking at the screen if I got the answers for the outcome of the poll, but not yet. Talking about a little bit further on employment condition. Sometimes the employment condition is just very strict. It's just written in the employment contract or in the employee handbook. This is what you get paid, or this is your car allowance, or this is your bonus, or a guaranteed bonus. Or sometimes you create an employment condition by an acquired right. So you are applying or providing, let's say, the car, but there are no strict rules for years and years, and you didn't amend it, and then it becomes an employment condition. Now get the outcome of the poll, and it says 20% has such a unilateral changes clause in the contract, 50% it says it doesn't, and 30% don't know. Okay, good outcome. I'll continue a little bit more on the individual change of employment condition. So we just talked about it. Sometimes you have this unilateral change clause in the contract, and sometimes you don't. But there is some specific case law when you can change an employment condition unilaterally as an employer. And then we apply, of course, the requirements from the case law. One of them is the important Taxi-Hoffman judgment. And then we see what is the motivation for the reasonable offer to change the employment condition. Is the offer itself reasonable? And can the offer be accepted by the employee, be reasonably required? Those questions answered can lead to that the judge can allow you to change the employment condition. Later on, also important to say is that with the Taxi-Hoffman judgment, they didn't take note of any unilateral change clause. They did also note that the Stof-Mammoet judgment, and they were looking at whether this was a reasonable offer, thinking about a phase-out scheme or compensation. But even more important was the circumstances in this case. So sometimes in this case there was circumstances that could lead that the offer by the employer was reasonable, and there was also the timeline of the situation, whether there was their phase-out scheme applicable. So there was the impact of the change was also minimized. Also, if we look at the collective change of employment condition, there could also, if we look at a collective change, we also have different sets of assessments. So that could be one, the good employment practices. So that could be a route. The other one is section 613, and that's also referred to the unilateral changes clause. And then also the judgment of the Stof-Mammoet judgment I referred to earlier. That's also applicable to collective changes of employment conditions. Another role can also play for the Works Council. And that could be important because sometimes they have a right of consent, but most of the time they don't have a right of consent because it's just not a policy where for what they have to receive the right of consent of the Works Council, and then they just ask a voluntary consultation of the Works Council. Important to know, if you talk with the Works Council of a change of employment condition, most of the time that's a good thing, but then please don't open the door that they have a consistently consultation right for every change you want to apply. So no continued right for the Works Council. However, we also saw in case law that it's important to involve the Works Council because it can help you to implement the change of employment conditions, as it could be an indicator and also an important role to play to say, okay, we have a compelling interest. With this unilateral changes clause, we have a discussion because we have the judgment of Taxi Hofman and Stove Mammoet, but we also have this unilateral changes clause. But we see that this assessment is coming a little bit together. So there's also a question: why should we include a unilateral change clause in the employment contract? Because the assessment is a little bit the same. The assessment of the unilateral change clause is more focusing: do you have this clause in the employment contract? Is it in writing? Is that correct? But also, do you have a compelling interest that outweighs the interest of the employee? Most of the time, you will not succeed, even though there's a really financial driver. So it's a difficult test to meet, and therefore there are more indicators that if you have, for example, a collective change of an employment condition, and if you involve the Works Council, and if there are circumstances that requires this change, and also can motivate that this is a reasonable offer, and you offer also a phase-out scheme, then you are sometimes successful. And then also worth mentioning is the judges also look at what kind of employment conditions will change. Is that something pay, or is that something about fringe benefits? So probably it's kind of logical, but if you have a salary reduction, this test is very difficult compared to a test that you are make a reduction of or when you offer something like a public transport card instead of a company car. Because you can also motivate, okay, this has maybe a financial driver, but still the impact on the employee, because it's not his salary. And you have also a phase-out scheme and also an alternative to offer for transportation, then that's also come into play. Yeah, so in general, it's a difficult test to change employment conditions. Sometimes it's worth, sometimes we see that employers have this unilateral change clause in the contract, but we see more a trend that based on case law and also involving the Works Council in the right way can help to implement employment change of the employment conditions. Right. I'm looking at the screen if we have any other questions. Otherwise, I'm looking at Alain if we have anything else to add.
I don't think so.
Okay. Okay, then I would thank you very much for attending this webinar. And we look out for a next registration, the 4th of March. And of course, registration of our live event, the 11th of September. And I wish you happy holidays.